Namaskar. This evening, we at PIC are organizing an event in memory of late Sri Jayant Narlikar. As everybody knows that he was the finest scientist, astrophysicist the country had ever had. But we at PIC are more indebted to him because the organization that he raised IUCAA, is an institutional member of PIC. And that is why we are having this memorial lecture talk in which we are joined by Dr. Mashelkar, who is a close friend of Jayant Narlikar, and by the two ex-directors present and ex-directors of IUCAA. All three of them would be giving their personal memories and experiences. We hope that people come in large numbers, and we are also expecting that the two daughters of Jayant Narlikar will join us for the event. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Pune International Centre, I extend a heartfelt welcome to all of you to this very special occasion, Dr. Jayant Narlikar Memorial Lecture. This evening, we come together to honor the legacy of a man whose entire life was a celebration of curiosity. Dr. Jayant Vishnu Narlikar, one of India's most distinguished astrophysicists, a fearless thinker, a champion of scientific temper, and the founding director of the Inter-University Centre for Astronomy and Astrophysics. This evening, we are in the company of truly distinguished individuals, thought leaders, and pioneers, all of whom have had the rare privilege of knowing Dr. Narlikar both personally and professionally. Through their reflections, we will journey into the heart of Dr. Narlikar's legacy, his groundbreaking scientific ideas, his fearless intellect, and the world-class institutions he helped shape with vision, clarity, and conviction. Let us now extend a very warm welcome to our esteemed guest, Dr. Raghunath Mashelkar, President of Pune International Centre, will be joining us virtually this evening. And here with us in person, we have Professor R. Srianand, Director of IUCAA, Professor Ajit Kembhavi, Professor Emeritus at IUCAA, and Major General Nitin Gadkari, Director of Pune International Centre. Thank you for joining us. I request everyone to keep their mobile phones on silent mode throughout the lecture. Without further ado, I request Major General Gadkari to welcome everyone. Sir, the stage is yours.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm General Nitin Gadkari. I'm the Director of PIC. On behalf of Dr. Mashelkar, Dr. Kelkar, President, Vice President, PIC, I welcome you all this evening for a somber and emotional event. We gathered here to honor the memory of a towering figure, not only in stature, but also in vision, accomplishment, and contribution. Though I did not know him personally, but like most Punekars, the name always resonated in my subconscious. And every time it came to fore, it was because it was a matter of pride and an accomplishment. His passing has cast a shadow of grief across the nation. And the pouring grief that followed is a testament to how much he was revered by our countrymen. At PIC, we've thought we are indebted and earnestly felt that we must organize something as a tribute to the great man. And we are indebted on two counts. Firstly, he founded IUCAA, which is an esteemed member, institutional member of PIC. And second, he was a colleague and a very dear friend of our President, Dr. Mashelkar. So on both these counts, we thought that we must do something, and that is how this event got organized. We have with us Dr. Mashelkar online, which you can see on screen, with whom Jayant Narlikar, Sri Jayant Narlikar, shared a bond of friendship, respect, and mutual inspiration. We also have amongst us the present director of IUCAA, Professor Srianand, and the ex-director, Professor Ajit Kembhavi. Both of them, all of them, would be sharing their memories with us this evening. And I hope at the end of it, we would have paid a rich tribute to the great man. Dr. Mashelkar gave a very poignant interview the day after to Rediff Mail, if I'm not wrong, sir. And he called Professor Narlikar as the voice that lit the cosmos. I'm sure all of us would be more happy to hear the same from Dr. Mashelkar, so I hand it over to Dr. Mashelkar to continue the proceedings for the evening. Thank you. All yours, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, friends. We have gathered today in this solemn evening, not merely to mourn the loss of a great scientist, but to celebrate the timeless legacy of Vishnu Narlikar, Jayant, to me, to all of us. He was a man who looked at the stars but kept his feet firmly on the ground. A man who taught us that science is not just about knowing the universe, it is about knowing ourselves. The outpouring of grief that I saw when Jayant was no more, I have not seen the like of it, excepting when Ratan Tata passed away. I can only compare the two. The whole nation was in grief. I remember 50 years ago when I returned to India, I sought the blessings of elderly, and one of them was Mrs. Tara Bole. She was the managing director of Nogi. Many of you, or some of you, will know this monkey brand black tooth powder. She was the owner of that, but she was a great scholar herself. And I remember when I sought her blessing, she said, "Mota ho, Jayant Narlikar ho." That was the aspiration. Can you just imagine? Jayant was barely in his 30s and he had acquired the status of an icon. She said that 50 years ago, whole nation respected him. Today, the nation respects him 50 years down the line, 150 years down the line. His imprint is such that he'll be remembered forever. In a sense, he was a timeless inspirator. I worked very closely with him in many different capacities. Both of us were members of Science Advisory Committee to the Prime Minister. I myself was involved with IUCAA's Governing Council, and so on and so forth. What I'm going to do is to stick to the subject that has been very wisely chosen. As I always said, Jayant was an individual, he was an institution. Individuals go, institutions live forever, and they leave a legacy. And I'm very happy that we are going to talk about his legacy today. And to my mind, sticking to the subject, I would say that there are 10 points that stand out for me as far as Jayant is concerned. And I would go through all 10 of them as far as I am concerned. Jayant didn't just explore the cosmos, he reminded us that our greatest mission lies in expanding the frontiers of human mind and spirit here on Earth. And the legacy he leaves behind actually reflects that. What were the 10 points I want to make? I think the first and foremost was science with integrity, and always. Jayant stood for truth, even when it meant standing alone. He challenged the dominant Big Bang theory with the Hoyle Narlikar alternative, not for fame, but for intellectual honesty. His courage reminds us that science must follow evidence not fashion. The second is making science reach every home. He didn't just publish papers, he ignited minds through books like Akashashi Zawar Zawiya and countless Doordarshan programs. He brought galaxies into our living rooms. He believed that scientific literacy is the true foundation of a modern nation. We should never forget that. What's the third point? The third legacy he leaves behind is greatness with humility. Despite international acclaim, he remained deeply humble. I remember after receiving the Padma Vibhushan, he continued to walk, talk, eat with students at IUCAA. No airs, no barriers. His life taught us that real greatness lies in simplicity and accessibility. The fourth is Swadeshi science but global excellence. He could have stayed at Cambridge, but he returned. He built IUCAA, and I will be speaking a little more about IUCAA a little later, from the ground up, proving that India can do globally competitive science on Indian soil with Indian minds and Indian values. The fifth is for a scientist, this is very important questioning, questioning as a virtue. Jayant never feared dissent. He taught us that progress in science comes from not from obedience, but from bold inquiry. Even as he laid textbook reforms, and you all remember that, he defended facts over dogma, even if it meant inviting resistance, and he had plenty of it, as we all know. The sixth is uplifting the forgotten. He democratized opportunity by creating IUCAA's associate program, for example. He empowered young faculty from remote colleges to access world class resources. His outreach to rural schools showed that talent exists everywhere. What is missing is access. He believed that everyone is someone. He believed that minds on the margin are not marginal minds. We must give them opportunity. My seventh point about his legacy that he leaves behind is crossing boundaries of thought. To him, science was not separate from culture or creativity. He wrote fiction with Mangalatai. He cited Kalidas and Aryabhatta with the same ease as Einstein. He believed that a true scientist is also a humanist. The eighth legacy he leaves behind is ethics before achievement. He rejected projects that conflicted with his moral compass, including certain military collaborations, as some of you might remember. He reminded us that scientific capability must walk hand in hand with ethical responsibility. The ninth point I would say is rooted in India but reaching for the world. He was proud of being an Indian but also a global citizen. At the IAU, he raised India's voice on the world stage. At home, he revived pride in ancient Indian astronomy, showing that our scientific heritage is both rich and relevant. And his 10th legacy is science as a moral force. He fought pseudoscience with reason, not with ridicule. And he stood up. I remember I was in Delhi at that particular time. Uh, there was an effort to introduce astrology courses. And he was one of the first ones to stand up and say astrology is not science. He had the courage to do that. We have very few people today who have the courage to do that. I don't want to elaborate on that. Uh, he used stories like the return of Vaman to subtly challenge inequality and superstition. He believed that science should not just inform minds, but uplift society. Now I come to the great gift he has left us for Pune, for Maharashtra, for India, and for the whole world. and that is IUCAA. I'm very proud of IUCAA. I have seen it grow right from the time the first stone was laid. It was nothing short of revolutionary at the time it was built. He built IUCAA not as a conventional research institute, but as a model institution for democratizing excellence in Indian science. If you ask me, and I'm quite sure that later on Dr. Srianand and Ajit Kembhavi, who know much more about IUCAA, will tell you more about it. But what I saw from a distance as well as a close friend were five distinctive features that made IUCAA different. Ahead of ahead of time, I would say. And according to me, what are those five? Uh, I believe that first of all was the inter-university model. As a national resource, not as a local island, IUCAA was created as an inter-university center, not tied to one university, but serving all. Its aim was to empower faculty and students across Indian universities to pursue cutting-edge research in astrophysics. And I must acknowledge here the support that he got from Dr. Yashpal. They two thought alike, worked together, and that is how those inter-university centers were created. Long before the ideas of shared research infrastructure became mainstream, IUCAA enabled digital access, just like our Hadron Collider model in Europe that we talk about. The associate program invited faculty from small and under-resourced colleges to spend sabbaticals at IUCAA, receiving training, mentorship, access to global literature and tools. That was the first. The second point I like most about IUCAA is flat hierarchy and culture of openness. Jayant eliminated rigid hierarchies. There was no sir culture in IUCAA, and that culture has been still preserved. Students, postdocs, and professors engage as equals in an open door environment. Such a horizontal institutional culture was rare in India, especially in the elite science institutions in 1980s. Every week there were informal science meetings where junior most researchers could challenge senior scientists and were encouraged to do so. Jayant himself often led these sessions. Third was integration of research and public outreach. IUCAA was conceived as both world-class research center and a hub for science popularization. The two rarely go together, by the way. Public engagement was not an afterthought, it was a core mandate. And long before science communication became an institutional requirement, IUCAA ran planetarium shows, school programs, teacher training initiatives, and so on. IUCAA's science popularization program reached lakhs of students in Maharashtra and beyond through mobile telescope, lectures in Marathi, interactive workshops, and so on. The fourth was emphasis on Indian languages and inclusivity. Jayant insisted that science must be made available in Indian languages to reach every corner of the country. This went against the grain of English only elitism that dominated Indian science. It democratizes access to cosmology and astrophysics. IUCAA published educational materials and hosted public lectures in Marathi and other regional languages, setting a precedent few national labs followed. World-class infrastructure built from scratch in India. I have seen it myself, the way he envisioned and executed the design of green, low-cost, architecturally innovative campus dedicated to excellence. It's a showpiece, not just for Pune, for Maharashtra, for the world. IUCAA's infrastructure was designed not to impress foreign guests, but to optimize scientific collaboration and comfort with aesthetics, eco-friendly spaces, encouraging cross-disciplinary conversations. The library is accessible 24 into 7. The canteen served as a social melting pot, and visitor housing ensured that scientists from any part of India could work and stay seamlessly. How do I summarize such a great life, such a great institution? He just did not build IUCAA, he reimagined what a research institution in India could be: egalitarian, open, inclusive, and connected to the nation. IUCAA stands as a living testimony to his foresight. As I said, Jayant was not an individual, he was an institution, he built institution, he himself was an institution, he leaves behind the legacy. I have a suggestion for the government of Maharashtra. Uh, when we write the next set of textbooks, basically, in all languages, and in particularly in Maharashtra, I would say there should be a lesson on the legacy that Dr. Jayant Narlikar left. Of course, we'll have chapters on his science and science communication, what else he did. But these 10 points on legacy that I find is an ideal for every individual scientist. He should be trained to learn from this legacy and practice it. And to my mind, that would be the greatest tribute for Jayant as uh, a scientist like whom I have never seen before. Pune won't be the same, Maharashtra won't be the same, India won't be the same, Indian science won't be the same. I must end by saying that there is one photograph that I have kept. When I paid my last respect to Jayan, I started crying like a child, and a newspaper has carried that particular photograph. I think that sums up not just Mashelkar's feeling, but the feelings of a billion of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Mashelkar, for that inspiring and deeply personal reflection. Your words capture the magnitude of Dr. Narlikar's contribution to both science and public thought. Now I invite Professor R. Srianand, Director of IUCAA, the institution that Dr. Narlikar himself envisioned and brought to life. Professor Srianand, the stage is yours.
Good evening. It is indeed a great privilege for me to be here discussing about Jayant Narlikar. As we all know, his history, his life, his science contribution is very well written. Not only written by various people, he himself has several articles describing various aspects of his life. So I'm not going to try to repeat that. Second thing is that I'm not very good in any language. Forget about my own mother tongue. So I cannot be very sophisticated when it comes to describing anybody or anything. This is the first time I'm also doing this kind of speech. So I will just say whatever I feel from my heart. So if there are some mistakes, it will be there. Please pardon me. I'm not going to try to be politically correct or whatever. So just now we heard from Dr. Mashelkar that one of the creations of Dr. Narlikar, Professor Narlikar, I never called him Jayant because of some reason, is the creation of IUCAA. Again, if you want to put it in a crude language, what exactly was the motivation behind creating IUCAA? If you want to do astronomy, as you all know, it is very expensive science. So you really need access to very big telescopes. And these telescopes are going to be in random places. So you need to have travel grants. You need to be able to go there and perform this very expensive affair. So it is confined to very few elite institutions. So Professor Narlikar's idea, I think with several other colleagues who were with him, is to set up an institute so that people who miss the bus, who are not members of TIFR, who cannot go to Cambridge, or who cannot do postdoc in Caltech and other things, they can still do research, not only at the lowest level, at the highest level, and they still become renowned scientists, and they can become well-known astronomers. If their history is not revealed to you, you will not distinguish where they come from. So this is his aim. The fact that I am standing before you is the success of that story. Okay, I missed the bus. I didn't know that you have to write entrance exams to get into research institutes. I end up in a remote place in Utkal University, Bhubaneswar. Why did I go there? It is because there was a researcher who did PhD from TIFR, for some reason could not pursue research for 10 years. This is Pushpa Kare. She restarted her research mainly because IUCAA was created and she became one of the associates. So she went to, it is a bit longer story, maybe this is interesting for you, because she went and people said that we will give you money to do research, but you should take some student. So she advertised something and I just landed there. And it was very strange. People used to go from Odisha to Tamil Nadu for higher studies. I went from Tamil Nadu to Odisha. And I'm telling you, that was the first PhD in astronomy and astrophysics. As far as I remember now, there was only one more PhD in that topic from that department. So I am standing here to say that whatever was thought of in establishing IUCAA has already happened. The fact that I am director of IUCAA is the success of Professor Narlikar and also is success of IUCAA concept itself. Having said that, I'll go through 4 topics. These are my impression on Professor Narlikar. I think these are the things I want to learn from him. I hope I learned from him. First thing is that how to do research. We all know he was one of the proponents of alternate theory of our universe. That happened in 1960s. So when I first encountered Professor Narlikar, it was in 1990s. At that time, it's more or less, people said that more or less steady state we are not going to consider. He himself gave up on the first version of steady state, and he was actually working on something called quasi-steady state theory. And I vividly remember. But can you believe, at that time, 1990s was crucial period for Big Bang cosmology. There are a lot of proofs which not only consolidated Big Bang is correct, it challenged any alternate model you will do. And if you see in India, all these results come from where you know. They didn't come from TIFR, they didn't come from IISc, they didn't come from RRI. All these results consolidating Big Bang cosmology came from IUCAA Pune. Okay? That tells something about Professor Narlikar. I can't imagine now, even in Big Bang cosmology, if somebody says some value is 75, and if somebody else says that value is not 75, we agree with Big Bang cosmology, but the value is not 75, it is 65, they don't talk to each other. Because this is the kind of situation. But we are dealing with a person who is well known for proposing a theory which is alternate to Big Bang and always questioning Big Bang. And we were all growing under his shadow, but we were all encouraged to do what we feel is correct. While we have a lot of discussions with him on what all the questions we should ask in confirming our theory, we realized that he never said that you guys should not be working on this. I think this is the first thing you have to learn from a scientist. Science is absolute. Maths and physics are absolute. It's not like you are doing history. So we can have prejudices, but as long as somebody confirms everything logically, you can keep on questioning, but you cannot prevent them from doing. I think this is the first lesson I learned. And I think this is true in IUCAA. People are absolutely free to do what they want to do, as long as they practice correct practices of physics and mathematics. So this is the thing I learned from him. Second thing which is amazed me is as a teacher. And I don't know, very few of you would have got an opportunity to listen to him teaching a regular course. So again, since I came from university, I didn't have regular course on cosmology or relativity. These are the building blocks of any cosmology or any research you want to do. So I end up attending Professor Narlikar's course because he was giving a course on cosmology. You can't believe, 99% of the course was on Big Bang model. And I can't express myself. It was the best course I have ever heard. He is the person who is not believing in Big Bang cosmology, but it was, if you just attended the course, you will never accept that this person does not believe in Big Bang cosmology because he was so thorough. And it was, I still have the notes from that course, and it was amazing. The second thing which we have to learn is that nowhere during the class you will feel that he will hurry or something. You'll start very slowly, and the speed will be maintained till 1 hour. And being Narlikar, the class will be over exactly at 1 hour. And you will be amazed, the amount of topic you would have covered in that 1 hour at that speed will be enormous. I know that I teach courses regularly, but we are always under the pressure. I want to cover this much in this time. And we don't have this kind of self-restraint to teach at a particular pace so that everybody understands and he will finish that thing without hurrying that. So I think this basically tells that how much preparation he has put into this. And second thing, jokingly I say to my colleagues, because he is fond of cricket, and whenever you see cricket matches, when people like Tendulkar or Rohit Sharma plays a fast bowler, commentators will say that this guy has too much time in hand, because all other people will be hurried to play the quick ball, but some of these talented people have too much time in their hands so that they can manage it very easily. I think Professor Narlikar is one of the gifted person. No activity he has done, he has hurried. And never I heard that I need to do something else, please go. Always, all conversation, all interactions will be smooth, and it will be done over the stipulated time. And any person who is interacting will leave that room feeling that your point of view has been heard and you got the answer you want from that other person. I just wanted to, one more point I want to make is about administration. I think Professor Narlikar is a dream administrator, and rightly pointed out by Dr. Mashelkar. And we have a trend in IUCAA, everybody goes and stand in the queue to get tea. So you will never recognize a director or dean or whatever. And that time he will sit with us and discuss with us. I was jokingly saying, we were with Professor Narlikar for such a long time. See, we were not with him during 1960s and 70s. We don't know how great he was or how great he is. Only thing we know is that he is our director and is a renowned physicist. And we used to interact. And the day we arranged his funeral, I just realized that how big he is. It was completely visible to us. And he never make us feel that he is such a big person and we are beginners. I think this was amazing. So I will just give an example of tolerance of Professor Narlikar, because as an administrator, he gave freedom to everybody. This was absolutely democratic setup, but he has extremely high tolerance. So I just give an example. At some stage, the year I joined, there was somebody recommended to him that we have to go through the human resource course for everybody. So there was a person who came and interacted with all members of IUCAA, just to refresh them. The SWOT analysis, this, that, and all. And I must say that admin was extremely happy. I think they were all rejuvenated, and this process went well. Unfortunately, Professor Narlikar also said that we should do this to the faculty members. I think that was a big mistake. So imagine somebody coming and make a SWOT analysis of crazy faculty members. So that session was horrible. It went beyond. So everybody started questioning that HR person who was trying to do our exercise. And I can tell you, if I were the director at that time, I would have shouted at everybody, because it was an unruly behavior from all of us, because it was a democratic thing. People are, why are you asking this question? How do you know what we should do and all? Professor Narlikar didn't say any word. He let the process go. In fact, it was amazing. In the end, we started listening to this HR person asking us to do certain things. So I think this is the thing we have to learn from him. Lastly, he was emotionally attached with IUCAA. So you can see that every activity we had at IUCAA, he used to be there. So for example, in the recent time, a lot of people have retired because the institute is now 30-plus-year-old. So whoever started the institute, joined there, it is time for them to retire and move on. And Professor Narlikar was always there for these retirement parties, or whatever we call high tea. It's amazing that he still remembered why a particular person was chosen, what kind of contribution was expected from them, and how they delivered. And you can't believe people were waiting for him to come. For some reason, if he's not going to be present, they were very upset. And they were so elated by the time this whole function is over. And we have to learn from that. See, this is the dedication Professor Narlikar had to IUCAA, because he felt that people who helped him, irrespective of whether they were professors, drivers, peons, or whatever. He was there for every one of them. And he delivered the speech. It used to be highlight of that activity. And it used to have personal touch. We can clearly see that person will be moved and they will be crying. And this is the kind of thing. So now we have some 15, 20 new employees at IUCAA. They all came and told me during the last thing, we never thought that such a big person will have such a personal attachment to everyone in this institution. I need not go into science popularization and other things. It is well known, his commitment to this. Lastly, this is again personal. I think this is the thing I want to learn. I hope I will follow in my life. Professor Narlikar retired from IUCAA and he moved on and he used to come and do something. I took over IUCAA in a very strange situation. Nobody expected that our previous director will move. Both the deans moved. Suddenly I realized that administration, I have no experience in administration. So I have to start from scratch. So only thing I know is that we know the way institute is set up, we want to make sure that the same tradition is followed. You can't believe, I got advice from so many people what I should be doing. Means like, you can't imagine. They have nothing to do with IUCAA. They advised. One person who never bothered to advise me or call up and say, Anand, I want you to do this or something like that, was Professor Narlikar. Of course, I went to him and discussed with him on various things. Whenever you go to him, again, he has never told me that what he wants me to do. He will say that ideally what one should be doing in this situation. So I really respect that. I think this is absolutely essential for anybody to run an organization, that you have guidance from your seniors, but without putting their thoughts into it. I think this is very remarkable. I think he was, I must say this, Professor Narlikar was the only person who has not asked me to do certain things. So we would have done whatever he asked. I mean, that is the point. We would have done whatever if he asked me to buy a laptop, buy him a supercomputer in his house, I would have done that. But he never asked. Never asked for any travel, never asked for any. I mean, this is the kind of thing, it's impressive. So with this, I will say that there are a lot of things to learn from him. We are going to learn as we keep reading his writings and this thing. But only thing I will say is that there is a living memory, that is IUCAA. And we just follow what he has set up. And we hear that what will happen in 150 years down the line or 50 more years down the line. I think IUCAA will be there. Actually, just reflecting what was Professor Narlikar aiming to do at that place. Even now, yesterday I was in India for something. Whenever anything comes up, IUCAA, it is Narlikar only. Okay? We are all there just to implement what we thought. And our implementation will vary depending upon what is the kind of present day situations and what kind of evolution our country is going through. But in spirit, it will remain the same. And it will be invariant, and it will be a steady state universe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. That was a wonderful tribute, not just to the man, but to the continuing legacy of excellence he has left behind at IUCAA and beyond. To conclude our speaker session, we now welcome Professor Ajit Kembhavi, Professor Emeritus at IUCAA and a long-time colleague and friend of Dr. Narlikar, to share his reflections. Professor Kembhavi, over to you.
Thank you. Good evening. I don't look upon this as a condolence meeting. I look upon it as a celebration of the life of a great man. Okay. Now, we have heard a great deal about him. So much has been written about him, especially in the last week or 10 days, and there's really nothing left to say. Dr. Mashelkar gave a very nice summary in a slightly abstract way of 10 important points, and then Srianand gave a more personal account. But what I would like to remind this audience is that his main legacy is his scientific work. And he did excellent work at a very young age. He got recognized at a very young age. And then he continued to work almost right to the last day. So now, I would like to follow his way of doing these things and try to explain to you a little bit about his difficult theories. So because it was his attitude that everything about the universe can be explained to everyone. Now, this is not just a random collection of people. You're all very intellectual, you're all accomplished, but in different areas. So now I thought that I should try this experiment of trying to explain to you about the hardcore science that he did. And I'll do it in 2 parts or 3 parts. But let's begin with the creation of the universe. So now everybody knows the thing about Big Bang, that the universe started in a Big Bang. It began in a Big Bang. What is not realized, it was an actual beginning. Meaning it was not as if there was dark space and suddenly all the galaxies came into being in a big explosion. Before the start, there was no matter, there was no radiation, but most importantly, there was no space and there was no time. And so even space and time are supposed to have been born in the Big Bang. And then the universe was very hot, and then it expanded, it cooled, and then there are structures formed like the galaxies and clusters of galaxies. An extremely important discovery of the 1930s was by Hubble and independently by Lemaitre, which said that the universe is expanding. So you see that it started in the bang, it keeps expanding, and what will happen to it later? In the old days, there were 3 possibilities. Either one, it would just go on to a maximum size and then fall back on itself. There would be a big crunch, and there is the end of space and time. The other possibility will just keep expanding, and then it could be expanding with in 2 different ways, but then it just becomes thinner and thinner, less dense, and then everything gets converted to neutrinos. So, but then there is a completely alternative theory, different theory from this. And it was created in 1948 by Bondi, Gould and Hoyle, then very young physicists, some of the greatest astrophysicists of the last century. And they said, no, this Big Bang is a myth. How can everything come out of a Big Bang? They said the universe has been there forever. But if it is there forever, then how can it keep expanding? Because it will just become thin and it will just die out. So they said, no. What happens is that it's in a steady state, it always looks the same to you. But how can it expand, become thinner and look the same? So that's continuous creation of matter. Matter is created all over. There was no specific mechanism which was thought of at the time, but because the created matter compensates the expansion of the universe. So therefore it is in the steady state. Now, the Narlikar's first papers was on the distribution of radio sources. You know that you have the GMRT here, 100 kilometers from Pune, in Narayangau. So a similar telescope, but a much smaller one, was built in Cambridge by Martin Ryle. And Martin Ryle was a great astronomer. And then we did measurements with the telescope, and he had his own vision, which was consistent with the Big Bang universe, that the universe is evolving. But at that time, the other very great astrophysicist was Fred Hoyle. Now, Fred Hoyle worked in 2 different ways. In one way, he did very conventional, very creative astrophysics. I mean, every single great discovery in astrophysics has somewhere or the other Fred Hoyle lurking in the shadows or one of the main creators of that concept. But at the same time, he created the steady state theory, and he took great pleasure in telling people that they were wrong. So then in 1960, he acquired a student, that was Jayant Narlikar, completely different from him. Fred was very outgoing, very dynamic, all the time fighting with everybody. Jayant, as you know, was a very gentle person, very quiet, extremely competent, and did his work. So he got entrapped between this fight between Fred Hoyle and Martin Ryle, and which became very serious. Then it finally ended in Fred Hoyle, in disgust, leaving the institute which he has created, and a very young person was appointed director in his place. And Martin Ryle eventually got the Nobel Prize. Okay. So that did not mean that the Big Bang had been established because of the work. Then something amazing happened. In 1965, a radiation was discovered which people thought was the remnant of the hot phase of the universe. When the universe was hot, there was a lot of radiation, and now it has cooled to 2.7 degrees Kelvin. Very, very, very cold. right? But there were just a few points. It had not established. So the steady state people, Nalika and Hoyle, and then the Chandra Vikramasinghe of Sri Lanka, but who was also in Cambridge at the time. They were young people, and they said no. They thought of many different mechanisms by which this kind of radiation could be created, not in the Big Bang. But then as time passed, the Big Bang, it was established completely that this radiation is exactly as would be created in a hot phase of the universe. There was no doubt left. And therefore, the steady-state theory in the original form had to be abandoned. And then came quasi-steady-state theory. Okay, meaning what? You see, the idea then was that there's a Big Bang here, and then there is, in the steady-state theory, there's no bang at all. But Narlikar and other very famous astrophysicists, Geoffrey Burbidge, so they again were completely unlike each other. And Geoffrey Burbidge was massive. I mean, when he walked, he emitted gravitational waves. Okay. So then and he was again extremely bombastic, and they used to gather in these pubs in Cambridge and drink a lot of beer, and then make a big noise about the universe until the landlord came and just ejected them from the pub. Okay. So, and then, so they came out with the study of the quasi-steady-state universe, meaning that it has got small little bangs in it, and then these bangs emit radiation, which could be the what you call the microwave background radiation, and so forth. Now, you must understand that these are not just ideas, okay? Because in Hoyle's time, in the early 1960s, the young Jayant had worked on various aspects of steady-state theory. Now, here they worked on further aspects of the steady-state theory. And the whole idea was to preserve the concept of an eternal universe. They did not like a universe which was born on Wednesday and was finished on Friday, along with space and time. Okay, so they wanted something which lived forever. And one of the consequences of the quasi-steady-state universe is that something from the past could have leaked into our universe. And amazingly, many of these concepts which are developed, both in their mathematical form, as well as in some of the consequences, still are very intriguing. I mean, nobody works on the quasi-steady-state theory now. And then, but in spite of that, there are all these things which keep happening. For example, the most modern James Webb Space Telescope has been discovering galaxies which are very far from us, which are very close to the Big Bang, but which are completely evolved, and they are developed galaxies. It is not like one of our 7-year or 11-year-old grandmasters, okay, or a 3-year chess prodigy. It is like a 6-month baby playing in international football. Okay. Right? So then they said, so it is these galaxies are there, and perhaps they are leaked from before the bang to us here. So these are all very intriguing possibilities. Now, people have talked about the democratic principles of how democratic Narlikar was, and then now he could have compelled many of us. We were his students. I worked with him in various capacities for 53 years. Okay, so he allowed me to think of any problem. I couldn't think of any problem, and then he asked me to work on something which was close to his theory. But then as I grew up and I started getting interested in more conventional astrophysics and more conventional cosmology, and he never said, don't do that. I mean, he said, all right, I mean, you do what you like. And that was his principle. When we came to IUCAA, he could have chosen those people to come to IUCAA who worked on his theories alone. And there's nothing wrong with his theories. They were not crazy concepts. Okay, they were full living alternative views of physics and astrophysics. Okay, so we could all work on them. But he said, never said do any such thing. So a lot of work needs to be done. The second thing I should mention, it's a little bit more abstract, is the Hoyle-Narlikar theory of gravity, which came out in 1966. And then, now what happens is that it is generally believed that the steady-state theory comes from it, etc., but that is completely untrue. The theory of gravitation is a totally independent development. You see that the original theory of gravitation was because Newton, very simple, all of you know it, F is equal to minus G m1 m2 by r squared, and from which everything that we know about our universe can be derived, barring a few small inconsistencies. In 1905, Einstein gave his theory of relativity, special relativity, and then he combined gravity with that special relativity in a very magical way, in which the effect of gravity is not as an attractive force, but it is because of the changing structure of space-time. It's an extremely profound thought. And from 1915 until now, 110 years, every test which has been carried out for Einstein's theory has proved to be correct. And the more sophisticated we get, the more intricate our analysis, again, unquestioningly points to the correctness of Einstein's theory. Right? So there are many alternative theories, okay, but they are not really of any consequence. So why did Hoyle and Narlikar wanted a new theory of gravitation? So, and this was in the 60s, when really many modern tests were not available. There's nothing which said Einstein was wrong. But then they had these abstract ideas, and they're very, very beautiful ideas. One idea is that the universe should be scale invariant. What does it mean? Is that you see that some of us live in Panchavati here, and we're in Pune, and then we are all on the earth. And let's suppose if the earth got 4 times bigger, everything got 4 times bigger, we really don't anticipate that there is much change. Of course, it depends on whether there are 4 times as many people, because then we have 16 times as many more conflicts in a much more difficult world. Okay, but then if you make the universe bigger or smaller, it doesn't matter. The scale doesn't matter. So if you make this hall bigger, but just imagine making this hall bigger in different ways, in different directions. Meaning one door moves some distance, the other moves the other distance. Will it remain the same? It clearly will not. I will just fall down. But at a very deep level, physics is conformally invariant. Okay, meaning that the physics just tells you that their idea, Hoyle and Narlikar's idea, was the size of the universe or changing its shape in different ways in different directions should not matter. The theory should be conformally invariant. Then there was another very profound principle. In modern times, you will find echoes of this principle everywhere. In all our ancient scriptures, everywhere. Is that a oneness of the cosmos. Okay, meaning that the things very far away. But I don't exist independently of those things. It is not that we are here, we are created, we live, we die. There must be some unity there. And in modern times, meaning from the 19th century onwards, it's called the Marx principle. Because it's a very simple thing. You know, all of us have learned in school that if I shoot a particle, the force acting on it, it will go in a straight line. The question is, straight line with respect to what? What determines this straightness? What determines the way particles move? Because the particles have something called inertia. And in Marx principle says that it is the whole universe which acts together to determine the inertia of one small particle. Okay, so what is the consequence of that? A very interesting, very simple consequence is that one particle cannot exist. Because a particle's properties all arise because of interactions with other particles. So 2 particles can exist, but you can't have a universe with 1 particle. So now, Hoyle and Narlikar wanted to build this Marxian concept into a theory. So they did that, and then they developed this very beautiful thing called a conformally invariant theory of gravitation. And then, when you make a new theory, it has to make new predictions. The problem was that the predictions are all of the abstract kind. Because when you come closer to ourselves, when you come to normal, I'm not talking of normal meaning humanly normal thing, but normal physics. Physics close to the earth, physics close to the sun, even physics at the scale of the universe in some ways that we knew. In all those circumstances, the Hoyle-Narlikar theory reduces to Einstein's theory. Okay, so that creates a big problem because all is nice with it. The question is, what is new? And then there are many new things which are to be developed and which could become more and more obvious as our technology improves. For example, we now have gravitational waves. Okay, so the gravitational waves come from specific sources, but they come from all over the universe when the universe was a different epoch. And the question is, on those large scales, can this conformally invariant theory of gravity make new predictions? So I believe that there are many different, a great deal of work which is left to do, and hopefully somebody will do it someday. Then last, the third one, is another very interesting concept, which is much easier to understand. The first one was all right, the second one was difficult, but this is completely easy. Now you see that where did life arise on the earth? Now this, you see that the life, I mean, we all feel that, I mean, God created life. I mean, that's quite an easy way out. But if you say that, did God created cats and dogs of different kinds and people like us, everybody, or did God just set up life as a single cell organism or even more primitive than that and then allowed evolution to take its course? Because after all, there was Darwin 200 years ago, and then we know these things can happen. So what created life? And one possibility is that life came to us from outer space, meaning it came from it came from outside. God knows outside meaning where. So Hoyle had this idea, and he said that life could have come to us with comets, for example. So things which have come from very far away, and then they life here. And when he first thought of this concept in the 1950s and 1960s, they're completely alien, or partly because of the theology, partly because of the belief, partly because of the belief or pride in the fact that we were alone in space, they cannot be people like us, and so on and so forth. How can life... I mean, so he could not publish that idea. Because you see, you have to publish the idea because then it has gone through the vetting process. Some referee allows it to be published, which means that it is not all bunkum, but it was not allowed to be published. So what he did was that he wrote a book called The Black Cloud. And it was a science fiction book which talks about life coming from outer space. So now the point is that if this life, and Chandra Wickramasinghe followed up on this idea for many years, and that was his passion all the time. Narlikar was also involved. So then, over the last 20 years or so, that one possibility was that if these things came from outer space, then you could find their trace in the atmosphere. And then, so the point is that if you go up the atmosphere and look for presence of life meaning primitive life, bacteria and so forth, the question is, did they come from downstairs or did they come from outside? And you can't immediately decide that. The idea was to try to take a probe to a certain distance from the Earth's surface, which is unlikely to be contaminated by life forms which have risen up from the surface of the Earth. So Narlikar proposed this kind of an experiment. It was seriously considered. Then Ranjan Gupta, who's our neighbor here in Panchvati in Khagol, then he was also involved in that. But then finally, that experiment never happened. But the point is that if it was carried out, maybe it would have made a very great discovery. Because you see, the times are different now. And it would be incredibly surprising. I mean, I cannot even imagine a situation where there is no life elsewhere in the universe. And why should we be alone? You see that the point is that what are the new things? First of all, there's water on the moon, there's water on Mars, there's water wherever you look for it. Okay, then there are these comets which are there called main belt comets, not the usual comets who come, and they also have water. They shouldn't have water because the water should have evaporated because of the thing from the sun. And it is quite possible there is life on the moons of Saturn, for example. Okay, so the moons of Saturn are favorite places for life. And then, but the new element, the new kid on the block is exoplanets. So you see that you have these exoplanets. Until 1995, nobody had ever discovered a planet outside the solar system. They had been looking for it for hundreds and thousands of years. In 1995, they found one. And the reason is technology, meaning that our measuring instruments became very accurate. What you need to do is that if there is a planet very far away, 5 light years from us, around a star, we need to be able to measure its speed to within a few meters per second. Right? I mean, we don't measure speeds on the Earth like that now. Here you want to measure it such accurately. We know how to do that now. And therefore, planets have been found. Thousands of them are there. And it is established that there must be planets around virtually every star in the galaxy. And so if you add up the stars in our galaxy, and if you add up all the galaxies in the visible universe, you get a number like 10 raised to 21. No one knows what the name of that number. Okay, but it's a very large number. And then, even if a very, very, very small percentage of those have life, then we have millions and billions of civilizations, completely developed civilizations, much better than us. So you see that in the 1960s, when Fred Hoyle thought of these matters, people laughed at him. They didn't allow him to publish it. When Narlikar tried to do this in 10 years ago, again there were difficulties, there was no real interest, and it didn't happen. So you see that is the foresight of these people, is the conviction. So there's just two things, I'll stop by saying two things. One was the democracy, meaning that his own students, his own co-workers could really do what they wanted. Okay, and then he never got irritated. Occasionally, let's say he's a very gentle person, never gets angry. That is not true at all. I've seen him getting angry about 7 times in 53 years. Okay. So the first time was when, it was very startling for me, because we were waiting in a lunch queue in TIFR, and he had asked me to work on a particular problem. And then with their Professor Chitre was there. So many, just lunch, everyday lunch queue. And then I asked him something and he answered. Then I asked him something else and then he again gave me an answer. Then I asked him something else. And he said that, look, you have been asking me these questions. Now what you want me to do is, you want me to hold your hand and do the calculation for you. Okay, so he said, why should I do that? I mean, I can do it much faster by myself. Why should I give you the problem? So you think of it yourself and you do your own calculation. That was the first time I saw him getting irritated. And after that, maybe 6 times, maybe 7 times more, this long thing. So he was a great Democrat. Then the second thing was that even though he was such a nice person, he only did what he liked. Right? So he knew what he liked and he always did that. Okay, so that included working on the steady-state theory, working on the conformal theory of gravitation, because you see that the time that he was in Cambridge was a very rich time for Cambridge. I mean, all of Narlikar's contemporaries, many of whom were students of Hoyle, they worked on different things and each one of them established a complete domain of astrophysics. Narlikar also had his own domains, but they were completely iconoclastic. I mean, they went against the prevailing thought of that time. He didn't care. But he always remained honest to his work, did not swerve from it at all. Then of course, after that, a few years after Narlikar, meaning not after him, after his PhD, more people came online, which included Stephen Hawking. So Narlikar was Stephen Hawking's tutor. The Cambridge colleges have the system of being tutors, and Narlikar was a tutor for Stephen Hawking. And then Stephen Hawking wanted to work with Hoyle. But Hoyle was at that time full. So he worked with somebody called Denis Sciama. And some of the greatest astrophysicists of our time have worked with Denis Sciama. So I always wonder what would have happened if Stephen Hawking had worked with Hoyle. Because I know that quite soon after he started his PhD, he wrote a paper to say why the Hoyle-Narlikar theory was wrong. Okay, but I wonder what would have happened if he had actually started working with Hoyle. So with that enigmatic thought, I'll stop here. I hope I've not carried on for too long. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor, for your heartfelt words and for painting such a vivid picture of Dr. Narlikar, the scientist and the human being. I request Major General Gadkari to deliver the closing remarks and vote of thanks. Thank you.
I had decided to say that there was not a wet eye in my concluding remarks. But I will not say that. Because today was not a day to feel sad, but to feel happy. What we just did was celebrate life of a man who knew no boundaries. And if I was to sum up the 3 speakers, Dr. Mashelkar spoke about his friend, his philosopher, and his guide, and his companion. Professor Srianand spoke about a guru, a colleague. And Professor Ajit Kembhavi spoke about the scientist that he was. What a wide range that we were witness today of Jayant Narlikar, and there could not have been a better tribute than what we got, a celebration of his life. I'm here to thank each and every one of you. Firstly, let me thank Dr. Mashelkar, Professor Srianand, Professor Kembhavi, to have shared their memories, their thoughts, and their moments to make this evening very, very special. I also want to mention that we have amongst us both his daughters who've been very gracious and kind to accept our invitation, be here, and honor us in this particular evening event. And this event would never have been complete without the presence of all the audience who are sitting here. You made it very special, and you made this event worth memorable and worth what he deserved. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much, and Jai Hind.